So all the chapters in this book were researched and written during the coronavirus pandemic, which has affected every continent of the world, bringing upheavals and calamities to countries and peoples in multiple successive waves. In fact, some of the chapters were written at a time when the pandemic was raging or regaining momentum in the country where the author was residing, wreaking untold havoc on the lives and the livelihood of the people. At this time, the pandemic is still present with the appearance of new strains, infecting even those who have been triple or quadruple vaccinated. And despite some countries having declared COVID-19 endemic in order to move beyond the pandemic mentality, which can be debilitating economically, socially, and psychologically, this book doesn't make any pretense at claims of clarity due to divinely endowed wisdom or benefit of hindsight. And any assertion of clarity, if there is such a thing, would have to wait months and even years from the publication of this volume to have any credibility. Having said that, one of the extraordinary gifts of human beings is the ability to simultaneously experience the present while reflecting on the past and gazing towards the future, synthesizing all the dimensions of life, temporal, spatial, and spiritual, into a logical and meaningful narrative that can serve as a foundation and inspiration for individual and communal self-understanding and plans of action. Indeed, the task of sense-making does not take place only on a personal level. We also have the ability to reflect collectively, thus benefiting from group wisdom and reducing risks of parochialism, myopism, extremism, the countless other negative isms that can assert themselves when there is a lack of dialogue and mutual sharing of ideas, experiences, and aspirations. We also fall into this trap when the individual human mind is allowed too freely to ruminate without the necessary restraints, self-imposed or otherwise. Thus, it is with this goal of gathering the fruits of individual and group reflections that the work of creating this volume was initiated and carried out. Not so much as a systematic study of the theme of this book, rather a combination of puzzle pieces that contribute to unveiling an extremely complex and grand picture of a world undergoing unprecedented changes and of humanity attempting to cope with what has been labeled, perhaps in a cliched manner, as the new normal. Despite this expression resurfacing in popular culture and being widely applied to the state of the world brought about by the pandemic, what exactly characterizes this new normal in the present, what it will ultimately look like in the days to come, and how long it will take for a newer normal to replace the present one remain issues that not many people have examined in a systematic way. On the other hand, one isn't sure that any such attempt will yield anything more than well-reasoned conjectures. The truth is, while human beings would like to believe that we can control the directions of global developments through our carefully devised sustainability goals and admirable scientific and technological ingenuities, the SARS-CoV-2 virus that gave us the COVID-19 pandemic reminded us that a tiny biotic creature, invisible to the naked eye, and can readily mutate to ensure its chances of survival, can throw a gigantic monkey wrench into all our meticulously thought out 5-year and 10-year plans. Despite the wide-ranging topics presented in this collection, this volume takes the word communication as the key word for the various research and reflections on the life and mission of the Catholic Church during the COVID-19 pandemic as well as post-crisis. The reader will readily recognize that what is referred to as communication here is an extremely elastic and multidimensional category. Within the context of the church, and especially as discussed in this book, communication refers to words and images that the church transmits to the faithful and to the world to help the people cope with issues brought about by the crisis. This communication helps contextualize these traumatic events in sound theological principles, which need to again and again be creatively restated and reaffirmed with every human happening, both big and small, that takes place. Second, communication also refers to pastoral and evangelizing actions carried out by the church and its members to sustain the life of the church amid the grave situation of pastors and members of the flock succumbing to COVID-19, under church doors, and unlit altar candles.
Very good, really good.
Third, communication refers to the models and strategies by the church and its leaders to employ technological means to promote ecclesial communion, nourish the faith life of the people, and to dialogue with individual and groups to create a truly synodal church. And finally, communication also refers to ways that the church discerns and engages with the signs of the times in order to transform raw experiences into valuable lessons, human suffering into salvific grace, and pandemic isolation and division into greater post-pandemic interculturality, interdependence, and collaboration. What we can see in this volume is that all the contributors are either writing from Asia or are Asian, even if they are living in another part of the world, such as the US or Europe. Asians, however, are part of the global church, and discussions are limited to the local situation alone. While part 2 of the book focuses largely on specific Asian geographical contexts, part 1 presents discussions and reflections that concern the church as a whole. What this eclectic set of research presentations demonstrates is that boundaries only exist as a human mental construct and much more fragile than what we would like to believe. The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly proved that no matter how much we try to impose borders around localities and countries, or isolate ourselves from one another, these measures of separation can easily be breached by the coronavirus. The insistence on maintaining strict isolation and confinement oftentimes only resulted in greater suffering and frustration. The life of the church is the same. The local church finds its full meaning in relations to the universal church, and the universal church carries out its mission with people not in an airtight vacuum, but in specific circumstances and places. As the church strains forward in the new normal with its losses, grief, uncertainties, and challenges, it is my hope that the discussions on church communication in this book reflect this spirit of looking for greater meaning in particular events, searching for a long-term vision from the present, and turning ongoing experience into transforming lessons. We received some comments about the book. Of course, Father Pernia wrote the foreword, and just this is one of his comments. The authors attempt to explore how things, particularly in the area of communication, can be done differently and better in the new normal. Indeed, they heed Pope Francis's insight that the COVID-19 pandemic is actually a call to reorganize the way we live life and the way we do things in life. It would indeed be a mistake if, after all of this is over, we simply bracket off the experience of the pandemic, file it away and archive it, and then go back to where we left off and continue with life as before. Rather, the challenge is for us to treasure this experience and allow it to shape the way we live life from here on. This is what the articles in this volume admirably attempt to do. Peter Fan, who is the Ignacio Elicario Chair of Catholic Social Thought from Georgetown University, Church Communication in the New Normal, a collection of essays written by Asian social scientists, theologians, and pastoral agents, is the first volume that deals with how the church in Asia can resume prophetic mission, the liturgical worship, and pastoral ministry in times of pandemic and post-pandemic. I enthusiastically recommend this volume, a fruit of profound scholarship and pastoral sensitivity, not only to all who live and work in Asia, but also to those living on other continents, both Christians and followers of other religions who work for human flourishing. Paul Sukup from Santa Clara University in the US writes, this fascinating volume helpfully combines compelling case studies of the church responses to the pandemic from throughout Asia, with analysis examining the opportunities and challenges offered by the pandemic, both to church communication and to the self-understanding of the church. It should be essential reading for pastoral ministers, scholars, and communication officers. And finally, Daniela Suspan-Jerome from St. John's University School of Theology in the US writes, Church Communication in the New Normal does timely and important scholarly work exploring the across-the-board emergence of faith communication as an essential aspect of ministry. Using COVID-19 as an overall case study, each chapter of Church Communication in the New Normal demonstrates the integral role of communication in the way a community of faith gathers, worships, and extends care. The book also showcases creative directions for ministry in light of the pandemic experience, all the while rooting the study contextually across a variety of cultural locations, both distinct but common, especially from the perspective of faith. This book is an essential addition to global scholarly reflection on pastoral communication. So the book is now available online to download for free from the ARC website. And this is also our brand new website. We just test run it today. So we decided to launch the book along with our new ARC website as well. So all you have to do is go to asianresearchcenter.org. You go into the electronic library section, and under the section called ARC Books, you're going to see this book that you can download. And there's also a couple of other books there that you can also download for free as well. So, today we have reflections from Antonio Pernia, John Murray, Norman Malcourt Pena Jr., Robin Xavier, Rico Jacoba, and then Dong Quang Pham. So I would like to now stop my sharing, and I would like to invite Father Tony Pernia to give his reflection. And you can also give a little short introduction of yourself as well as the other presenters. Please introduce yourself briefly, and then you can give your reflection. Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Anthony, for this opportunity to be able to share a short reflection based on the book, Communication in the Church in the New Normal. I am Father Tony Pernia, SVD. I belong to the Society of the Divine Word. And I'm teaching here at our Mission Institute in Tagaytay, that is in the same compound as the major seminary or the School of Theology. And we have a number of students who are from other cultures, other countries. We have students from China, from Myanmar, from Vietnam, from Indonesia. And so we are a rather intercultural, international community, student community here in our institute. And so, first of all, I'd like to thank Anthony and the contributors to this volume for gifting us with this precious book. And I'd like to congratulate Anthony and the contributors also for this book. You see, it seems that today a number of people are seeing an end to the pandemic and therefore are no longer feeling the urgency and the necessity of responding to the challenge of rethinking and renewing the way we live life and the way we do things in life. I believe, however, as I mentioned in the foreword, that it would be a mistake if we simply bracket off this experience of the pandemic and when all of this is over, simply go back to where we left off and continue with life as before, with no changes, no transformation taking place. I believe that the challenge is precisely for us to treasure this experience of the pandemic and allow it to really shape and reshape the way we live life from here on. And this, I think, is what the book does. It admirably records the many experiences of the pandemic and presents them as an impetus toward reshaping our world and the way we live our lives in this world. Today, as a result of the pandemic, there is a lot of talk about digital evangelization, but often much of the talk about this topic seems to be rather loose and arbitrary, with hardly any foundation or basis in theology. And this is exactly one of the things that this volume offers, providing a theological basis for today's interest on and need for digital evangelization. The book shows us that at the heart of the church is communication. And this is because God is communication. A God, in other words, whose nature is to communicate God's self to humanity and to the world. As we read in the book of Genesis, the very first verse, in the beginning was not just God as God is in God's self, but rather God as Word, God as communication, God as revealing God's self to us. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And as we learned in theology, God reveals God's self, God reveals God's subjectivity through objectivity. That is, God reveals God's self through the things of this world. And this is the basis of the notion of sacramentality, which is a revered principle in Catholic theology. Today, among the things of this world is digital communication. And so the digital world may also be considered as a sacrament of God's revelation today. As the church today is faced with the proliferation of digital communication, there seems to be among Catholics a sense of ambivalence at best and a sense of confusion at worst at this new phenomenon. Among Catholics, attitudes towards digital communication range from outright rejection to suspicious distrust to cautious acceptance to enthusiastic embrace. I think that by providing a theological basis for digital evangelization, this volume can be seen as proposing critical embrace of digital communication as a way for the church to respond to the challenge of the digital world. And so may this volume contribute to the creation of a new world, a world of fraternity and solidarity, in the words of Pope Francis, a new world characterized by a greater awareness of our belonging to one another as sisters and brothers in the same human family, a greater solidarity with the poor and the excluded, greater respect and care for the earth, and greater openness to God's will and recognition of God's sovereignty. Once again, congratulations, Anthony, and the contributors to this volume. And thank you for gifting us with this rare record of our experiences of the pandemic, stimulating us to rethink and reshape our life in the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Tony Pernia. Since we have you here, does anybody